Hi, everyone. Good evening this wonderful Sunday. We are here today for another session of OYALD Table. Today's session will be part of our World Voice Day celebration in Nigeria this year, and is brought to you by the Organization of Young African Leaders for Development in partnership with Tobore Olimoye Consulting, and of course, the World Voice in Nigeria. You're all welcome. With us today, we have four wonderful people who will be part of today's panel. First of all, let me introduce Professor Emme Ekekwe. He's a professor of political science. He retired from the University of Port Harcourt, where he served as deputy director of the Emerald Energy Institute. And he was also the pioneer director of the Cloud Against School of Government. At the moment, he is a visiting professor at the Ignatius Ajuru University of Education and also at Palmo University of Medical Sciences. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Okay. Next, we have Tobore Olimoye. Tobore is a financial planner and a personal finance coach. She is a lead partner in TO Consulting, and in the past 5 years or so, she has been a regular resource person in our events for World Voice Day in Nigeria. You're welcome, Tobore.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
All right. And next, we have Ihechi Achom. She is a musician, and she specializes in voice performance. She currently leads the media and communications team of OYALD. Ihechi, you're welcome to the session.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. And finally, we have Emmanuel Lara. Emmanuel is a project monitoring and evaluation expert. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he currently serves as the Secretary General of OYALD, and he is a Cameroonian. I mean, everyone else here is Nigerian. He is a Cameroonian. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Greetings to all. Thanks for having me.
And I am Anthony Okoro. I currently serve as the coordinator of the World Voice Day in Nigeria, and I'll be your moderator in this evening's session. Now, the topic for our discussion this evening is the reawakening socio-political consciousness among Nigerian youth. This is a very important topic considering the recent happenings in Nigeria and in Africa in general. This session will be part, like I said earlier, will be part of the World Voice Day celebrations in Nigeria. The World Voice Day is a global celebration of the human voice, which cuts across voice health, vocal arts, and vocal sciences. And the World Voice Day is celebrated every year on April 16. Yeah, this session is coming on April 30, but it's still part of the World Voice Day celebrations. I promise this to be quite an exciting one. But before we move into the session proper, let's ask Emmanuel, who is the Secretary General of the Organization of Young African Leaders for Development, to tell us a little bit about OYALD, just in a few sentences, Emmanuel.
Okay, as you said, specifically a few sentences. It's the Organization of Young African Leaders for Development. Actually, it came about due to some disappointments. A group of African youths applied for something and were not selected, but our contact details were all put together in a pool, and we decided to come up with a solution out of that, should I call it disappointment or failure we had. So hence, the Organization of Young African Leaders for Development was created. We have at least 20 countries represented, but I'll say 5 active countries. And the whole idea is to have a network where we could brainstorm on ideas and then make ideas grow as Africans. So it's a very Pan-African movement in itself. But our intention is that the various ideas, because the members are all carrying out development-related activities in their various countries. So our intention is we could get good ideas and then scale them up across Africa, or if someone has an idea which we want to push into Africa, using such a group, we could push it across Africa. So once again, that's the Organization of Young African Leaders for Development for You. We have a website, Facebook page, and all the other things going to.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Emmanuel. And so I guess it's time to get into the meat of our discussion this evening. To better place our topic in perspective, I think it's important for us to do a little bit of a historical foray. Let's look at how over time the Nigerian youth have been involved and have had this socio-political consciousness that we are talking about. And I'll call on Professor Kikwe at this point to guide us on this, to maybe briefly, Prof, how has it been in Nigeria? How socio-political conscious have the youth been, and how involved have they been, starting from independence to the present day? Prof.
Okay. I hope I'm coming across clearly.
Sure, sure.
Okay. We've seen, well, let me put it this way. We're emerging from what appeared to be a long period of inactivity by Nigerian youths into an era that signals a new awakening, a new consciousness, a new direction. But that era of inactivity had not always been that way. If we go back to the nationalist period, the period late 1940s, 1950s, during the struggle for independence in Nigeria, we'll find that the youths were very active in the political parties, very active as student union organizations, both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. We'll also find that even up to the 1970s, Nigerian youths were very active, especially in the struggle for independence in the former Portuguese colonies, Angola, Mozambique, and so on, Namibia, and also in the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa and Zimbabwe. They were so involved in small groups on their student campuses, through their music and through their artistry in terms of artwork and so on. So they were very, very active. In fact, the first foreign policy reversal that Nigeria, if you like, suffered at independence, when Nigeria had entered a defense agreement with Britain. It was the Nigerian youths, through what was then called NUNS, the Nigerian National Union of Nigerian Students, that said to government over a series of demonstrations, no, you can't do that. If you're independent, then you're independent. You cannot be leaning on your former colonial master for your defense. You can do all that by yourself. But in brief, they were active, and that activity led to the abrogation of that agreement. And during the military era, they were also very active in opposition to the military. The Ali Must Go movement was the highlight, a high point rather, in those activities. A series of events led to nuns, as it was then called, being banned. But not long after that, NANS, National Association, not union anymore, National Association of Nigerian Students. And all this was, if you like, some nominal footwork to keep the military off their track. But one must also say that from that period on, we seemed to be coming down to some degree of inactivity. some degree of conservatism, if you like. The youth, in my opinion, seemed more interested in not in engineering or causing to be engineered a new society, a new direction, but more interested in becoming part of the establishment. And that, in my opinion, played into the hands of the state, played into the hands of the government, because that made it possible to identify a few of them, give them positions and keep the movement virtually inactive or playing in such a way that, they always pleased what the state wanted. For me, that shift is important because I would say that was when the young people, in my opinion, were no longer playing the role of youth in any society. They were no longer playing the role that youth have played in the previous era that I mentioned, in the nationalist period. When you think of that nationalist period, you think of a man like Enahoro, right? Anthony Enahoro, young man, journalist. You think of even people like Aminu Kano, a young school teacher, all right? These are people who took on the colonial government. It was Enahoro who moved a motion in parliament to say, no, Nigeria must be independent in the 1950s. Where was he coming with all the ideas? That idealism, that visioning of what society should be, that critique of the present, and that appreciation and nudging society to move into the future. To me, that is what defines youth. Because that's when young people begin to understand and to critique the society they meet. That's also when they begin to project the kind of society that they would like to grow up in. The generations before them had defined their own future. The youth have to make an input into the kind of future that they want to grow up and they want their children to grow up. Those are the kinds of things, in my opinion, that bring about development in any society. So for that period when the youth became amenable to being absorbed by the state, we lost visioning in our society. And as those of us Nigerians here will recall, we had Vision 2020, we had Vision 2015. None of those visions saw the light of day because they were not, in my opinion, there was no input from the generation that was going to drive that vision. And the generation, the older generation preparing it, had no stake in that future, right? So it was not surprising, in my opinion, that it fell through. But we've come back to the current period, especially in the last, from 2019, the demonstrations in Lagos and so on, seemed to have nudged the Nigerian youth into a new level of consciousness. We see some more progressive activity taking place, and that climaxed in the last elections with the movement of the young people, most of them in favor of the political party, the Labour political party. And all of them were very strident that the status quo cannot, it's not acceptable to them. All of them were strident in trying to voice, but they did not, in my opinion, actually give us a clear vision, but trying to voice that an alternative future is possible and urgently needed in Nigeria. So we seem to be entering an exciting new period, a period when maybe the youths have found their voice. The nuns of this world are still playing in the background. You see nuns right now, they're split into many, several groups. Some speak supporting the state, some speak opposing the state, some speak supporting the university administrations when they're on campus. So you can really, in my opinion, not clearly define where that national umbrella of Nigerians is going. You also have those, the young parliamentarians and so on. And you look at that group of young parliamentarians, good to have them in parliament, but what input are they making? What are they bringing from the youth constituency into governance? Those are the serious questions that we need to ask. We need to be encouraging them to ask. Some of us who are asking those questions, such as myself, I'm no longer a youth in that sense, but I have children and grandchildren who are youth. So I'm interested in what the youth think. And I'm interested in, the ideas of how we can improve life for everybody. I think those are my remarks for now. If there are issues, we can handle them later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. That was quite enlightening. Okay, so EHU, what do you think from what Prof has said? What do you think? What's the situation today? What's the level of consciousness and involvement of the youth in Nigeria?
Well, drawing from what Prof has said and from my own personal experience this period, I think the youths are beginning to wake up from their slumber. We have truth is we have slept long enough, and just as Prof said, I think this whole awakening started, if I may take us back, with the NSAS movement, when there was a nationwide protest of the police brutality that we experienced in the hands of the SARS. I personally have people that I did not experience it personally, but I have friends of mine that went through such horrible experiences. Unfortunately, once you're a young guy and you just look good and dress good, you become, in quotes, a fraudster. And it was as if it had become a crime as a youth, whether you're a male or a female, to look good or probably to even have money in your account. There were cases where your account has to be checked once your phone is collected, and people lost their lives. So I feel that whole thing made the youths wake up with the NSAS movement, and seeing that they were able to get the government to ban SARS was enough to for a lot of people. Yes, we lost some lives during the movement, but I guess that's what spurred us on. And it's also increased. We could see a hype in that awakening during the last election. I voted in University of Port Harcourt, and I was surprised that I got to my polling unit at 7:30 or 8 thereabouts, and we had close to 2,000 youths present already. I was even late. And unlike what you expect from the youths, before the INEC officials came, we had arranged ourselves and written our numbers and lined up. So everybody was ready for a change. So we had some professors, some elderly people come, and you could hear the youths telling them, if you're not going to do the right thing, please leave. We want to take our future in our hands. We want to do the right thing. You have lived your life. It is our life. You cannot tell us how we're going to live our life. So I guess I can boldly say that the youth have woken up. It's still unfortunate that even during the last election, still some youths were still used. So just as Prof said, there's still that divide. We haven't really come together fully because some people still want to be under the states. The whole idea of it's our money is a national cake, so maybe we just collect my own share. That is still in the minds of some youth, while some are just at the fence and like, I don't want to stress myself, anyhow it be, I'll flow with it. Then there's this set that is saying, no, we want to be the revolutionaries. We are tired. We need a change, if not for us, but for our future generations. So from the experiences we've had this period, I can actually say that the youths have woken up. And I seriously pray and hope that we continue with this trajectory, because if we can continue and maintain this velocity at which we're moving, I'm sure that we would see the change that we so desire.
All right. Thank you for that, DHE. Emmanuel, as an outsider in quotes, what do you think? How do you see current Nigerian youth and their involvement and consciousness?
Yeah, so I'm an outsider in quotes, as you said, but I'm also always very involved in Nigerian politics because I think whatever happens in Nigeria has an influence on the rest of Africa, being what Nigeria is. But before I get into that, I just want us to look at the etymology of the word politics, which it's a Greek word from politica, which means affairs of the state or the city. So most of the time, I remember like growing up, people would say politics is a dirty game, it's an old man's game and things like that. Notions like this already start making you to feel like it's not for the youths. But if politica, the origin of the word, means discussing the issues of the city or the affairs of the city, I think the youth have more at stake because most of the things that will be discussed will either be things to affect the present or things to affect the future. And the younger you are, the more chances that you'll be involved in the present and more of the future than the others who, are older in age. So I think on the contrary, the youth should be even more involved in political issues. Now, coming to the case of Nigeria, first, there is a question I just like to throw out there. It's, I don't expect a reply, but I usually just ask is politics, don't want to talk about politics now, we're looking at democracy. It's democracy / politics an African thing. Why I'm asking this question is because I'm of the school of thought that feel that most of our structures or systems have been eroded during colonialism, and what we have does not really suit the African model. That could be a debate for another day. With that being said, if we come to the context of Nigeria, I think as all the other speakers have echoed, it is improving, but it's not yet there. So I remember the election before this one, there was that a panelist I was watching over TV who said more youths were involved in voting for Big Brother Nigeria than those who participated in the election. And that just shows where their interest lies. So it is, should I say, funny, for lack of a better word, that something which does not really affect you as directly as such is where you are interested. But what is affecting your day-to-day existence, you are not interested in those things. There are many factors which we could list out here as to why the youths are feeling alienated when it comes to politics. One could be the disappointment. I think Inechi touched the borders of this when she said the last election, which I was following up very closely, and I was very hopeful for the turnout, like an African youth, like this might be an example. You said I'm coming for Cameroon. I think most of you know the situation in Cameroon when it comes to politics, which, it does not give us much hope as an African. So we look outside at times to get hope. I remember even when the Obama thing was happening. So I was very hopeful and listening to the voices of the youths, the candidate they were hoping for. It may not have necessarily turned out the way some people might have wanted, but I think just that involvement is already a good sign. But also a wake-up call would be when I heard one of the contestants who said he has put so many people in power and he was sure that he was going to become president. And he was sure that he was going to become president. And that was just to tell people, election does not start when they announce the date of elections. There are preparations to these things. There are structures that should be put in place. There are policies that you should ensure that voting is taking place like this. So you should not just wait till when they say go and vote or there's campaign period, then we start doing the talking. There's a lot of work to be done behind the scene, be it the policies, be it the lobbying, locally, nationally, and internationally. Some of these things have to be done to ensure that you win. It's not just a matter of the campaigning 6 months to it and the voting. There are lots of other powers in play. So I think that's where the youth have missed out because we get distracted with our Chelsea versus Arsenal, Davido versus Wizkid fan base, and then we don't pay attention to these critical things. And then just when they ring the bell of go, then we start wanting to clamor, make noise, and then, at times it's already too late. So I think that a number of these things which, one, the youth have been disappointed a lot in the past, hence they are feeling alienated. Two, at times I feel like the model of democracy / politics in Africa does not really accommodate the youth as such. And on the other hand, I think the youth just have to take that responsibility and take ownership of the process, because it's going to affect them the most.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that. Tobore, you're welcome back. So I think go ahead. I think it will be your turn now. What do you think about the current level of consciousness and involvement of the Nigerian youth in trying to build a better society?
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for your patience with my movement. Finally got to my destination. I had several meetings happening at the same time. So first of all, I want to say thanks to everyone who has spoken, from Prof to EHE to Emmanuel, and they have said the core of what the matter is. So what I would just add to what they have all said is youth need to understand the nature of power. Our youth seem to think that, and when I say our youth, you notice I'm trying to sound like I am no longer a youth. I'm edging very quickly and unfortunately rather rapidly away from the definition of youth by the number of strands of gray hair on my head. And I'm going to say to the youth that nobody is going to give you power. It's not going to happen. Power is seized, power is taken, power is collected. And encourage our youth that, yes, you were gingered, you were excited, you put in all of your zest, your energy, your belief to demand a better Nigeria, using the immediate past elections as case study. You really believe that your zeal was enough, your energy was enough to make that change. And the change you thought was going to happen did not happen. And what I have seen immediately happen is a fizzling out of faith, a fizzling out of hope, despair. The youth have suddenly given up already. You tried once, you were able to galvanize yourself once. You didn't fight a war. Nobody died. You did not kill yourself. They did not amputate half of the people's legs. The country did not shut down. People did not die. The only thing that died was your faith. And you are giving up already. Nobody gives up so quickly on something that is worth fighting for. So I want to encourage you that if you think it's worth it, if you think your future is worth it, the future of your children is worth it, if you really believe that the nation you're fighting for is worth it, then you must be ready to go on the marathon. It is not a sprint. Power is long-term. Power is for serious-minded people. And I challenge us, if those who are bad leaders are dogged in their badness, if those who are evil leaders are dogged in their evilness, we who are good, I wanted to say we who are good youth, you who are good youth should be dogged in your goodness and continue to fight. You cannot give up. They understand. People who already have power understand that you will give up. They know, they say it. I don't mind them. They will give up. Is it not social media generation? They will give up. They will fight once. And we are beginning to show that they may be right. I want to encourage us to begin to drill down inwards to what happened in the past, our fathers, our forefathers, who believed in nationalism. And Tony, that's very quickly going to make me talk about the nationalist spirit, which is what I think we have lost. Every individual seems to have this idea that I want to fight for a better country for my child. I want to fight for a better country. There's a reason you want to fight for a better country. Until we begin to say we want to fight for a better country because we want to build a better country, not because of something else attached to it, but because it is worth building. If we build a better country, if we build a country that is stronger, if we develop the sense of nationalism, where I come from doesn't matter, where the president comes from doesn't matter, Until we get to that stage where the tribe doesn't matter, the religion doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how diverse our backgrounds are, we can bring out one Nigerian, one African, one Cameroonian, one whatever national we want to label it to be, until we begin to understand that we must build the nation first. Every other thing we'll do will keep being a struggle. So let's start by building one. Let's understand that we need to build our Nigeria first, and then fight to remain a strong Nigeria, fight to remain a strong brand. And they will keep stepping on us, we will keep getting dispirited, they will keep dispersing the ship, because those who get discouraged will jackpot. The remnant will start fighting again until they can gather their funds to jackpot. And that which the colonial masters did in the past with force, they are now doing by being paid to remain our colonial masters. We are now paying them to say, remain my colonial master. They sit in their domains that will take our wealth to them. This is a long-term reality. And unfortunately, if we don't begin to develop a marathon mindset, Tony, I am worried that nothing much will come out of all the energy, all of the fight and power and zest we put into the last elections. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tobore. A few things while each of us was making their contribution, a few things that struck me. The first one I think I would like us to look at would be the one that Emmanuel touched on. He asked whether democracy is African. So I think it would be good for us to actually look at that, because when we are talking about politics so far, I believe that we've been looking at the model of democracy, and it's important we answer that question: is democracy African? Let's ask Prof. Is democracy African?
Let me first of all, before I start the question, thank the last speaker, Tobore, if I got the name right, if I pronounced it right, because she made a point which must not be lost. And that point is the danger that we may be losing what we saw being lit up. We may be losing it since February 25th. And because it's, like Emmanuel also said, what happens in Nigeria invariably impacts other parts of the continent. And one of the things that has been missing in this generation, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, is the Pan-Africanist spirit. It made a lot of sense before, and it still makes a lot of sense now. Europe is trying to come together. Here we are, both in Nigeria, trying to pull in different directions. If you don't have the critical mass at the global level, you will not make any impact. If there's no value you bring to the global market, you will not buy, you will not sell. You just roam about in that market and go home. So I would join her voice to say to our young people, this is not a one election struggle. That was always my fear from the beginning. And I thought something dangerous was happening, because we had got so psyched up that we thought it's just a matter of electing one person as the president. No, it is not. I'm sorry to say, and because I feel very strongly about it, that even if that one person were elected, there's a whole sea of corruption out there which he would have to work with. And invariably, just like Tony's shirt, it is white. You throw a lot of mud in it, before you know it, it becomes brown. So we had no structure, we had no sense that we needed to surround that individual we were hoping for with a vision of what we wanted. As she said, what's the Nigeria we want? What's the Africa we want? That's what the Julius Nyereres of this world, and who started as a young person. That's what the Kwame Nkrumahs of this world, who started as a young person. The Azikiwes of this world, the Awolowos, who started We just want, yeah, let's get a new government. We needed to sit back, advise ourselves that this is a long-term struggle, and prepare for that long haul. Like she said, if those on the other side are digging in, if you don't dig in, they will always carry the day. And elections come 4 or 5 years apart, right? You can't afford to give up now, and then in 3 years' time, you begin to mobilize. Stay mobilized all the time. Let those ideas not die. We don't have to die because there's a demonstration, because there's a crisis. They can stay alive because we keep a conversation going. We keep an ideal in front of us, and we try to ask ourselves, how do we achieve that ideal? There's never a time all of us will agree on one thing, but there should always be a time when all of us will agree on what is bad, that we should reject it, and agree on what is good, and make every effort to achieve it. So I just want to advise, as she did, that we must not begin to falter. That hope must be kept alive. Otherwise, the next election will not make it. In fact, if I were the leader all of us were looking up to, I would have said to everybody, hey, we're not going to make it 2023. Let's hope for 20 whatever else. All right? Because you need to till the ground. You need to get even those you are opposed to. You need to show them why they need to agree with you. We had a tendency to shut them down, like my little girl there said, sorry, the young lady, she said, when they turned around and said to the older people, you better do the right thing, otherwise go away. That was wrong. Democracy includes tolerance. Let them come, but be sure you outvote them. I'm repeating that because it happened in the polling center where I was. Somebody looked at me and said, these are the kind of people who will come vote. And I thought, you see, you judge a book by the cover, as they say. You never can tell. We can't do this thing by saying, oh, this person is in this age bracket. Like I said earlier, youth is not an age bracket thing as far as I'm concerned. It's a level of consciousness. It's a restive consciousness. It's a consciousness that looks for certain ideal, that looks for certain goodness in mankind and tries to see how best to achieve that kindness. But Tony, you asked me a question, so let me return to the question. Is democracy African? Yes and no. Democracy is multinational. In the 1970s, there was actually a very important debate continentally about this very question. And it was somebody like Julius Nyerere, who was talking to the colonial people, say, look, this democracy you come talking about here, we started it, we know it. Because we sit under the tree and we discuss our ideas and we appoint people who are going to carry those ideas out, and that is democracy. But that was also dangerous, the way he articulated it, because that line of thinking did not allow for opposition. Our communities at that time, no community in Nigeria was as big as Nigeria. In my village, what Nyerere described worked. It still works even to today. I may carry all the titles I like from all over the world, but when I go back to my village, people know exactly where I belong. My age grade knows where I belong, and they will discipline me, they'll talk to me if I'm doing the wrong thing. But we're losing that. Like I said, democracy is international, it is global. It is the strive for humanity to achieve freedom, to remove as many of the constraints in society as possible. And that is the march that has started from way back. It was the same march that our ancestors were engaged in. It is the same march that we're engaged in now. What has happened is that we have made that democracy now to say it has to be liberal democracy. It has to be this kind of democracy. We've given it so many different names, at least in my professional area, that sometimes you wonder what we're talking about. But that desire for self-expression, that desire to participate in what is good for me, That desire to make an input in how I'm governed is something which comes to every human being, no matter the society. And that's why dictatorships don't last. That's why autocracies don't last. That's why slavery did not last. That's why even when you held some people in chains, as soon as those chains were free, my friend, they took off, because the human spirit seeks freedom. And that applies across the world, across all continents. We have tried to manage that freedom, because it's not in the interest of everybody to just, to give it the way, to allow it to operate the way it should. Some power interests want it to operate in a way that continues to feed their own power bank. That is what the struggle really is about. Otherwise, in my opinion, deep down, we're Democrats. The problem is that we don't know when we become aligned with certain interests that want to keep that democracy, give it a certain form, because that form is what benefits them at that moment. So democracy African, very much so, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Prof. Would anybody like to add anything to that?
So I don't know.
Yes, Tony. Okay. So go ahead, Emmanuel. And Emmanuel, maybe I'd say.
Okay. No, so when I asked the question, I mentioned that I was not expecting an answer. It was a rhetoric question. And as Prof very clearly said, my idea of democracy at the time was what you said about the community, people coming under the tree, elders. It was very representative. But now with partisan politics, I think there's a lot of divide and rule kind of strategy in it. There's a lot of lobbying, which at times is not interest of the majority, but who has the resources to fund the campaigns. So it's not very representative at times. So the democracy I was talking about is this partisan politics which we have now. But I think democracy as the African had it, where even if we had a king and then he appoints a group of elders who are representing the various members of the community, that way the voice of every member of the community is somehow rising to the top and is taken into consideration. That kind of democracy, yes. But I think partisan politics might have done more harm to Africa than good. That's just my thought.
Okay, and Tobore, you were about to add something.
Yes, I the recommendation. Serious a press of justice and equity. Justice for all, where every man is allowed to be free. Every man has access to education.
I think she's having a network challenge. So maybe.
Okay, sorry. It seems I dropped off the call suddenly.
Yeah, we couldn't really hear you well. I guess your network was a bit shaky.
Okay, it's the hotel I'm in. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much better now.
Okay, so I was just going to say that when it comes to the question around democracy, it's always very hard for me to respond, because when I'm subsequently asked what then is my recommendation, I usually don't have one, because I believe that democracy, the way it has been sold to us, is founded on principles that are idealistic. The ideal situation for democracy to work is that every man who has one vote, which carries equal weight, is well educated, has access to justice and equity, is well fed, and is able to reason soundly. For example, we have Prof on this call. Prof is extremely learned. Prof has years of experience, tons of knowledge. He has one vote. My great-grandmother in the village, who has zero knowledge about governance, does not know left from right concerning anything around the structure of the country, has one vote. The 18-year-old who has no experience about the power of making a wrong choice has one vote. Now, guess what will typically happen? When I understand that democracy is a game of numbers, and I am hungry and desperate for power, I will not target prof because the profs are sound and powerful, but they are very few. The hungry majority are far many and far more in number. All I have to do is target their vulnerability. They are not educated, they are hungry. So if I can feed them and feed their bellies and feed their minds with the information I want, they will vote for me, irrespective of whether I am the best decision for them or not. Therefore, the democracy of one man, one vote may be ethically right, and idealistically right, but in reality has brought us to the disaster we have today. Because we have too many hungry, poor, illiterate people. Our politicians understand this. You can scream all you want, but as long as for your one vote crying for what is right and just, there are 100 hungry people who will vote according to their primal desires to be fed. The politicians will always get away with it. Because while you have your say, they will continue to have their way. So that's my challenge with democracy, the way it is currently being run, of course, along partisan lines. But if you say, oh, not partisan lines, how else will they be run? Because we are people of many cultures, many tribes, many languages, many religions. How else are we going to be structured? We're going to be structured along partisan lines. So how else can you govern the people except you say one man, one vote? So we are going to need to find a way for the votes to carry weight. And until we do that, democracy as we're currently experiencing it will continue to be a fraud. That's submission to me.
Okay, thank you very much. What Tobore talked about, it has become quite relatively systemic, that he has even a term for it here. It's called the stomach infrastructure, where the politicians try to leverage on people's vulnerabilities and all that. So how do we get around this? How do we ensure that people are involved, that people understand the consequences of their actions? How do we try to reduce these vulnerabilities that the politicians prey on? And anyone like?
Okay, if I might say something here, I don't even think that the politicians would even want us to reduce this vulnerability. It's like, for me, I feel they want the youths to remain like this. I don't know how true this is, but I read it. I think I saw a post on Twitter before the elections, and the person's name was Ganduje, and he was, according to the tweet, he was saying that we should make sure that we don't allow the Nigerian youths to have their way in this election. And according to the tweet, he said if it happens, that what is going to entail is that the youths will no longer have respect, I'm quoting the tweet, for politicians. So trying to get a way to change that is funny. It is going to be quite difficult. It's not something that is going to happen because they feed off us remaining like this. They want us to be like this because that's the only time that they can achieve their aim. So that's why it's like when you bring up something that is going to change the status quo, they get defensive, and we've seen it play over time. You have instances where someone is elected and he doesn't come to his constituency. Funny enough, in my local government or even local government, it's like once you're elected, even as a councillor, before we know it, we don't see them in the community anymore. All of a sudden, they have houses in Abuja. So they only come back when it's end of the month. And when they come back, it's just time to share the money and they go. And as far as they keep sharing that money, people are okay because we just take it. Most people take like, don't worry, just hustle it, try and stay throughout the month. People don't even go to work in the local government. Sorry, they don't. It's just go sign your name and leave. So to some people, it's even nice So if you want to change, those people will not even allow you, because it gives them the opportunity to do other things that they want to do by the side, because they just go in the morning, write their names, and they leave. And probably in the afternoon, they could get someone to sign up for them. And at the end of the month, the local government chairman comes and there is Ghana must go spread everywhere, everybody collecting cuts, and they go. So it's going to be very difficult to change it, because so many people are comfortable with the whole thing. During this last election, I actually saw there were customized phones for people. Customized, we call it touchlight phones, small phones with I don't want to call the name, but with the presidential aspirant of one of the parties. There were 5 kg bags of rice. I was making my hair before the election, and the lady making my hair just got a call. And according to her, she said that their party leader called and that they should come to the village square, that they are sharing rice. And you needed to see people rushing to go and collect the rice. When I go home, my neighbors at the back of my house was like, you don't collect your rice, don't collect your rice. And you know what they were sharing? 1 custard bucket of rice. So the hunger, like Auntie Tobere said, is real. Changing that is going to take a lot of work. Policies have to be put in place, because the truth is, if people are not hungry, if they have every amenity that they want, then it will not be easy for you to pray. There will be no vulnerability, so there's nothing for you to pray on. But it's unfortunate that in this country, you rarely get power. So even those that have businesses, your business suffer if you don't have a generator. Now you have a generator, and most times you don't get fuel. You go to the black market and the price of fuel has increased, and you need to get the fuel. So you increase, because of the increase in fuel, you increase the price of your goods and services. So your business suffers. There is no good road. The insecurity is on the high. There is always it's like a tug of war between ASU and federal government. Students can sit in the house for as long as 8 months, 1 year. So if we really want to change this, policies have to be put in place. But the question is, who are the people that are going to put those policies? They are the same people that are there that want us to remain the way we are, because that is the only time they reap. If they change it, then they won't be able to get what they want. We were at home for 8 months during strike, and our ministers and our politicians were going abroad to attend matriculation and convocation ceremonies of their children. Our Minister for Education actually went abroad to do both matriculation of one of his child and a convocation of one in that 8 months that we were at home. We've had instances of there has been a surge in the movement of doctors outside Nigeria. Some of my friends that I know that work in University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital have all left Nigeria. And when our Minister for Health was interviewed and asked the question, what he said was that we have too much of it, so we are lending to other countries. So it's funny. If we want the vulnerabilities to change, from my own opinion, policies need to be put in place that will work favorably for these vulnerabilities to disappear. The simple thing is, give the people the basic amenities. If someone has lights, the person has good road. You can go to your farm and plant without bandits or herdsmen coming to kill you. There is food. That's basically what the common man wants. So if we had all those things in place, I don't think that the village women around my area will go and fight themselves for a bucket of rice or for 3 yards of wrapper that they will tie for the meeting that they want to do. So that's what I feel. If we want to get these vulnerabilities out of the way, then policies have to be put in place that will be favorable for everybody. Thank you.
I don't know if I could add something there.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I feel like I really wanted us to, after your question, a little bit more optimistic and practical about steps forward, because I often tell people, like, I don't think the change we want to see is going to happen in this generation, but at least if this generation builds a critical mass, which Prof was talking about, that will be a very good foundation to start. I think most of our leaders in the past, which we have listed here, the Krumas, the Nyereres, the Lumumbas, all of these guys, they failed because they didn't have a critical mass to support them. So when they had very brilliant ideas, like a guy like Thomas Sankara, I was watching a documentary the other day on Nkrumah and his industrialization plan he had. There were ideas which I think some of our best economies have not yet been able to put them in place. But because there was no critical mass for them to stand on, the least bag of rice that is thrown at somebody that are willing to pick up a gun and then shoot this leader. So for me, being a leader in times like this is just a suicide mission. But on the contrary, what we as a group of people should try to do is to build that critical mass. And I think it's going to be done through sensitization. Like Inyechi was saying, who is going to put in place the policies? When you have sensitized a good critical mass and then they're able to vote the right people, then the right people put in those policies. The work does not start from the top, it starts from the bottom. I also mentioned, like, youth should not think election starts from when they announce elections. It starts from now. You start building, doing your lobbying and all of those things. Long-term scenario, I think it should be sensitization. Our educational system also has some issues there which make the youth to think in a kind of way where we don't associate our actions to our results and our problems to solutions. So we think we have outsourced all the responsibility and all the rights. We are waiting for some NGO to come and save us. I'm shocked. For me, I find it insulting most of the time. I see issues in Africa, like the SARS issue, and people are in front of the American embassy. I'm like, what do you want the American embassy to do? This is your country. You have people you have put in power and have done something against you, and you're going to, it's like you're going to report now to the real headmaster in the school. Say, come and punish the teacher you sent to class. I find it insulting to our own authority, which our own social contract, which we have put in place. So I think we need to build that critical mass. The educational system has to be tweaked and adjusted to suit our own context and our own reality. Then we'll be able to translate it now into those who put in place the policies and all of these structures. Short term also, I think if rice is the problem, if there's any ethical way where we can also put in place a system while putting forward the good message to also provide the rights. I don't know how that's practical, but if that's the short-term solution, maybe we should think about it, because there's this quote which I always throw at idealistic African, should I call them revolutionaries, where I say, it's I think it's an American, one of these American leaders who said, I don't know if it's Martin Luther, who said, the evil does not win because evil people are too strong. It's just because the good people fail to do enough. And they start doubting themselves and they start questioning themselves and then they give up. It's not because evil is too strong. So if those who want to see things change can put in place all the strategy, they know that rice is what these people are using. How can we look for an ethical means to still provide the rice while giving them the good message and putting in place the good policies so things can really change? That might be a step in the right direction.
Okay, one practical example of what has recorded here is the last elections where I voted for the presidential election. We had over 2,000 people who came to vote. Some of them traveled, some of them took leave from their work, and they plan to stay for presidential and governorship election. Unfortunately, the governorship election got postponed, and then some had to go back. But anyway, because there was this large number of people, you saw some. Normally, in Nigerian elections, you see political thugs. Yeah, profile. I see your hand. I'll call on you shortly. They came and they were sniffing around, thinking of trying to see how they could snatch the ballot boxes. But because of the number of people around, most of whom were youth and who were very conscious, they couldn't do that. But when the governorship elections finally held, there were very few people. In fact, and I don't think there were up to 500 people there. And it was very easy for them to snatch the ballot boxes. And so this critical mass thing, this people getting involved is important. Even during the NSAS, there were various attempts to, how do I say, to scatter the thing, various attempts to torpedo the movement. But the people involved, they provided everything for themselves. Is it food? Is it water? Whatever it was, people were willing to donate to that. So we need to find a way to keep our youth united, to keep them galvanized, and not to lose hope. I mean, that is very important. Otherwise, I mean, we're just going back to the status quo. Prof, you wanted to say something.
The reason I raised my hand at that point has been solved. I could hardly hear you. Your voice got very faint.
Oh, okay.
So I needed you to, as they say, up the volume.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to something that came up while Ihechi was speaking. One thing that she kept talking about was policies. The question is, who makes these policies? The same person who benefits from the current state of things, how likely is it for that person to make a policy that will be against their interest? And also, she talked about the local government. Unfortunately, in most of the local governments, people don't come to work, both the elected and non-elected. Some years ago, I was living in Enugu State, and the local government where I was working, and even the ones around, the people don't, the councillors don't come around. They live in the state capital, some in Abuja, and they only come at the end of the month when allocations have been shared. And most often they just meet in the bank, they withdraw the money, they take their own shit back to the state capital. So how do we solve this? The politicians are benefiting massively from the status quo. And for us to come out of it, we need policies, we need laws which will come from these same politicians. How do we solve this conundrum? Anyone can respond here, anyone first.
If I may say something here, I just to sound a note of caution, that it seems to me we're looking at a problem. It seems so large, so threatening, and it's like we think it's beyond some solution. No, it's not. But I think it was Emmanuel who earlier on advised, and I think we need to repeat that advice. And Tobore also added to that, that we should look at what we're discussing as long-term, not short-term. It's not for the next 5 years, all right? And all the problems we've raised here are absolutely correct. Partisan politics has a problem with it. In Nigeria now, I was reading something not long ago that the most, if I may use the word, progressive party, Labour Party, had reduced the amount of money for buying forms. I think it was for senatorial or some such office to 50 million, excuse me. And you must ask yourself, who can afford that? All right? It's certainly not the youths we're talking about. If those youth can afford it, there's a godfather behind them. There's a sponsor behind them. And invariably, they're going to play largely to the tune of that godfather or that sponsor. And say to ourselves and the young people to themselves, can we each begin to make a difference where we are? Just each of us. If I have a job in the local government, and when you look at the local government that we're talking about, you know the local government system in Nigeria has virtually collapsed. Doesn't exist. They go there to collect money, but what do they produce? What service to the rural communities are they providing? Even the ones provided in the Constitution, they have not the means to meet those. I found it funny a few years ago, one of the, whether they did it consciously or by mistake, one of the things the federal government tried to do was to say, let's make local government autonomy real. Guess who was opposed to it? The local governments. They want to be appendages to the state government, and they want to be appendages to the governor, because those are the people who are nominating them. There are not many local governments in the country that have held elections the way they should hold them, but we don't protest that. All of us are protesting only governorship, presidency. Maybe we need to lower our sights and see what happens in our various state governments, in our various local governments. And like I said, wherever I am working, other youths, assuming I'm still a youth, the youths should be making sure, putting pressure on me that I perform, not for myself, but for whoever I'm supposed to serve. That's when we can begin to make sense out of this struggle. Because there's no one group. We said it here earlier. Nobody surrenders power. You work at it over time and you win it. And I'm not one of those who, I know a lot of dirty things happen in politics, but I don't think politics is a dirty game. My own personal view is that it is a sacred responsibility. I ask myself, suppose I was a governor of a state, a chairman of a local government. So many people are depending on me. And I disappoint them. Of course, I can't satisfy everybody. But it should be obvious that I made an effort to satisfy as many people as possible. I often wonder how our governors sleep at night, knowing the kind of money that comes through their treasuries and what they do with that money. So my caution is to say, please, democracy is too big. It's very desirable, but the process of achieving it is very long-term. And there has not been any history of any country where there was not a struggle, where those people at the helm just simply say, okay, we heard you guys, all right, come and take over. It doesn't happen. But you have to work at it. You have to have people who are committed. The problem with the youths is that we don't even have the level of consciousness. It takes consciousness. Tabore mentioned the grandmother in the village. That grandmother may be more conscious than the professor in town. When that professor in town, all he's interested in is how to get things for himself. But that grandmother is worrying, why do I look after my grandchildren? What do we need to help those people? So sometimes we think that our salvation will come from those of us who are educated. It's not. We are the problem, in fact, because we learned how to crook the system, not how to make it work. That's why stomach infrastructure is easy, because the student who finished university, he or she knows he or she cheated along the way to get to where they were. And his colleagues would cover him as he's cheating. The lecturer who cheated students, who oppressed students, who victimized students, is covered by his colleagues. I've never seen a university in this country where the students say, you see that lecturer there, from all our meetings, he's making life miserable for us. Administration, move him or caution him. It's never happened. Those are the kinds of places, in my opinion, where we really need to start, so that people begin to know that what they're doing is not for themselves, it's for the society. All right? So let's not lose hope. It's very big. Partisan politics, that's what we got now. If we needed to change it, the process is too long. It means you have to change the constitution. But it can happen, not today. If we build that mass and we have representation in the parliament, they used to be looking for who are the parliamentarians who are making the right noises. Can we align with them? Don't look for the perfect people. They don't exist. But look for those who are amenable to certain ideas that you think should be brought forward into that system. Otherwise, you'll always meet a door that is locked. And unfortunately, those who rule us have not yet realized that there is profit in the strategy that says, when the pot gets too heated, open the lid a little bit, let out steam, so that you don't get an explosion. Our people have not recognized that. And the reason they've not recognized it is because there are too many of us are available to be bought. Too many of us are available to be compromised. That's what I mentioned earlier, that's what had kept the youths down where they were. When you have student unions in universities who support everything the administration does, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And they support it because, well, they are all right as individuals. They come from the right ethnic group. They go to the right church. They do what the particular lecturer or dean wants. But they don't care what happens to the rest of them. We don't even have a system for holding elected student union governments accountable. But we want to hold the presidency accountable. It's tough. We need to begin this job at the ground level and then work our way up. And it's going to be a long-term process. That's the note of caution I wanted to drop.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Would anyone else like to add anything on that? Okay.
Yes, it's funny. Just hold that
Go ahead.
the phone, the hotel intercom is disturbing. But let me just quickly say something in addition to what Prof has said. I'll talk about what I am doing from my. Unfortunately, my video is also off because I can see the bandwidth is being affected too. So please pardon me. I want to just say, in addition to what Prof has said, or in response to what Prof has said, that what I am doing in my little corner of the world is I am beginning to create an awareness about personal finance, because in no other area has I've used the word evil one, as evil been able to permeate the world as excellently as via the weakness of poverty. You cannot claim to be a noble man. You cannot claim to be an honorable man until you have lived and dined with poverty and you did not get your fingers soiled. If you have not tasted poverty, you cannot say you are noble until you have smelled hunger, until you have lived with hunger, and you have slept with hunger, and you did not get yourself corrupt. Then you can claim to be an honorable man. These are not my words. These are the words of a militant I dared to challenge about the integrity of his actions in 2009. And he said to me, Tobori, don't speak to me about honor. Don't speak to me about ethics. I will sell my soul to the devil himself because I have lived with poverty. I have slept with poverty, and I know poverty intimately. And I initially argued with him, but with time I understood that I am part of the elite as far as some people are concerned. As far as the very poor are concerned, I am elite, I am affluent. How then do you communicate nobility, honor, and integrity to people who have not eaten? So I have decided to wage the personal war against poverty by addressing the issue of personal finance. I am fighting personally. So Prof, this is in response to what are you doing from your little space? I am beginning to teach people from the cradle the power of creating wealth, even from birth. From the little you have, how do you manage it? How do you create it? How do you ensure that you have something to transfer to the next generation so that we do not create another generation of poor people who will continue to be marginalized in perpetuity by the same rich people who they are also going to sell their votes to. So you are already poor, your children are born in poverty, your grandchildren are destined to be poor simply because you are poor today. I am starting the message very strongly and eloquently and passionately about personal finance. Because if we destroy the evil called poverty, at least to a greater degree, if we can increase the bracket called the middle class, we will fight the corruption of political injustice, at least kill it or make it mortally injured. And maybe there will be hope for democracy in our world. Tony, I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Emmanuel, I don't know whether you have anything to add because I know that you happen to work in development. You've been involved in a lot of development projects and all that. So talking about trying to fight this poverty thing, which is one of the things that the politicians leverage on for their stomach infrastructure? Or what do you think? Or how do we go about this?
So if I'm being honest, I don't know if the development work I've been doing over the last over a decade now is what I think will be the solution. From a private, I should not be saying this, but from a private angle, I think the efforts I'm making are better than what I'm doing from a professional angle. Why am I saying this? From a professional angle, I work with all these international organizations, and yeah, the drummer dictates the tune, and you are not too sure if the interest of the funding body is, yeah, I'm looking for a professional way to present it. So the funding body has their own interest, which is why they give you this grant money and things. That's why I said I think Africans have outsourced our rights and our responsibilities. We think that somebody is coming to save us. So I'm in that space where I am doing all this development work professionally, but I'm also trying to do my own personal things where I can guarantee the interest and the impact I want to see. But when it comes to professionally, I'm not too satisfied with the way, with the impact we are doing there in the communities, because you hear large sums of money, which you are following up as a monetary evaluation expert. But when it comes to the impact, I very well know that these funds could do, I don't know, 100x the value of what is actually being done. So I'm not, when it comes to honest conversations like this, I don't usually put my professional foot forward. But on a personal note, I'm carrying out a lot of activities like this, like working with young people. I think the 3 pillars of development, which are economics, I think food security and health. I'm actually very involved in the business side of things, a lot of startups around Cameroon. And then I'm carrying out this project with integrated agriculture, which I think if from the basis we can guarantee our education, our health, and our food security, it will go a long way to solve some of these challenges we're having, because people are hungry, your child is sick. You have to go to France, you have to go to France. How do you negotiate with France when France is in control of your food, your educational system, and your health? Those are life-threatening things, or that's the bottom survival needs, which you can compromise every ethical, should I call it decision or moral code, when these 3 things are hanging on the balance. So we as a people, I've just digressed because I don't want to talk too much on my professional side. Huh? So till we as a people can...
It's not really a digression, because sociopolitics is not just about politics. It is also about the society. So it's not a digression.
No, so I'm saying that I did not want to talk about my job side of things, because I'm not too satisfied with the way things go in that direction. So that's what I'm talking about, the personal side of things. So I think if we as a people are in control of these 3 pillars of development, then can we now put in place the structures we want? I always tell people our leaders are called dictators, not because they dictate to us, or not only because they dictate to us, but maybe because they are being dictated to. That's why they are forced to dictate to us. And when there is no critical mass to hold you down, when you go against whoever is dictating to you, then the rise or the bag of money is being given to the next person to take you down. So as I said, for any leader in our times, the best you can do is just to sensitize. That's why I take conversations like this I'm very passionate about them, because I think this is the best I can do in this generation. Trying to make some drastic change would be a suicide mission, because the same people you are trying to help are going to kill you. They are not going to understand you and are going to take you down. But till we have sensitized the masses enough and they are aware of what's at stake, can they now decide to think what's in their best of interest? So I think sensitization is the best step which we can put forward. And at the policy level, I think our educational system, which is more of just, should I call it, repetition of what you are being told, but not necessarily solution-oriented, where I mean, we look at problems in our society and we try to solve them. On the contrary, we are studying theories and repeating what people had said in the past a lot more than trying to solve problems in our society. So it's not really helpful to us. Meanwhile, if youths are participating in these various basic things, like they said, politics is about discussing the affairs of the city. Affairs of the city, before it became partisan and all of that, is just how can we make water better, light better, roads better? Those are the affairs of the city. So till we as youths are involved in these things, then can we really put our best foot forward?
Okay, EHE, would you like to add anything? EHE, are you there?
Okay, yes, I am. From my own angle as a musician, so I would just talk on the current things that we see happening over time. I think at some points we have actually increased the problem, especially those of us in the arts, music, for example, which I belong to. I think at some point we increased the problem because going through history of music, especially in Africa, when we talk about popular music was basically used more as a sensitization. So if we listen to the music of Fela then, you could hear him talk about the issues, this sensitization was done by many of them. But unfortunately, you come down to this crop of people that we have, and the theme of the song is centered around sex, money. That's basically it. Those are the two things that you see happening. So that has also contributed to the problem. But I think, fortunately, this period, we saw a lot of musicians coming out and taking a stand. And that also helped as part of sensitization, especially in this last election, because you had the likes of Two-Face, Fowls, many of them that people look up to. They came out and they were at the forefront. And there were some very wonderful piece of music that were brought out this period to sensitize people on taking a stand against election violence and doing the right thing, fighting for your future. So that also helped. So from my angle, or from the angle that I belong to as musicians, I think we have to go back to the drawing board and know that we wield power too for this whole building the critical mass that we need for the whole sensitization. We hold the power, and until we come back and do what we're supposed to do, it will be somehow. But once we get back and do what we do, because we spread message with songs, we spread message with our tunes, with our videos. So if we can go back to the drawing board, that would also help to make the youths not fall behind, because the truth is the result of this last elections has done a lot of damage in the whole ginger that we had. Many people had given up. I could hear, in fact, after the results of the presidential election was announced, I could hear things like, after all the suffer, will suffer, why will I come out again? And I was trying to talk to people around me, say, hey, it's not going to happen in just, it's not a speed of light thing. It's going to take time. If we give up now, then nothing will happen. So that's just it. So basically, from the angle of entertainment, if we can wake up and do what we're supposed to do, just as some have woken up, if there is more, then I think that will go a long way too.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There's this other aspect. Yeah, we're talking about building the critical mass, trying to fight poverty so as to reduce the vulnerabilities that these politicians tend to prey on. But there's this aspect where people make effort to help to maybe transfer skills and knowledge, which could help to reduce this poverty. And you find that the young people who are supposed to benefit from this they seem to be unwilling, or I don't know, to make the effort required to gain this knowledge, these skills. I've experienced that a number of times where we've brought out like a program trying to train people, give transfer skills, and yeah, a few people, some people come initially, and with time you find the number keeps dwindling, and then some are not even making the efforts. Maybe there's, I don't know whether it's that some people think that you could just maybe Bluetooth the knowledge and skills. So how do we solve that? And you find the skilled people are already migrating this jackpot thing. You see, doctors, health professionals, engineers, IT professionals. And that's one thing Nigeria is blessed with. We have very good medical professionals. We have very good IT professionals, but many of them are leaving the country. How do we solve these issues? Because it's important that these people are also involved. It's important that we solve these issues towards gaining that critical mass, towards keeping people engaged so that we can play this long-term game. Prof, I think you want to say something here.
You think so?
Yeah, looking at your face.
I was just thinking through what you were saying, and trying to align it with some of the other points that were made earlier. And everybody is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I think it was Emmanuel who said, try to emphasize the importance of sensitization, getting people to develop their consciousness. Very good. But we also ask the question, sensitizing them into what? It's important. It's like the same as saying there's some contribution music can make. What will be the message? Ihechi made reference to Two-Face, whoever they are, those people. And generally the kind of music that you get out there. I don't listen to music anymore because I don't hear anything inspiring, right? I don't hear anything uplifting. If there are political messages out there, maybe I'm not listening to that genre. I don't hear it. I ask myself sometimes, where are the Sonny Okosons? There was a continental problem, apartheid. Those people produced music that, whether you were in Pretoria or in my village, you knew about apartheid through their music. Fela was mentioned. Fela, when Nuns was banned, in my interpretation of that period, Fela became like the voice of the youth. And that's why he became very popular, because he was saying something they could relate to. What has happened is that our communities, our professional groups have allowed themselves to simply import what globalization was exporting to us without making, in my opinion, enough local input into what was imported and what we were consuming. So that kind of music became popular because that's what the recording studios think will sell. Nobody's making music to add value. People are making music to sell, and you don't blame them. They want to sell, they want to make money, all right? But if you are making money without a message, you're simply compounding the problems. You can make money and still be ethical in the process. Most things don't work in this country because those who rule us have no idea how they should work. For how long have we been talking about power in Nigeria? I don't know about Cameroon. I don't know about other African countries. In fact, I suspect their power system is better. If you had those who rule you, who had industries, who were manufacturers, they would understand about power. But they don't have any industries. The money they steal, they take overseas. They don't need to put it here to add value. So when you're talking about power, oh yeah, it's a good idea. We should increase it to, this megawatts. Then you put in so many billions. They steal the billions between the central bank and where the contract is to be signed. So at the end of the day, you don't get power. And you don't get power, people stay in poverty, in darkness. And like somebody here said, so long as there are vulnerabilities, they will exploit those vulnerabilities. Any place where there's chaos, somebody is benefiting from it. Otherwise, they will create order. Now, if that is the situation, I come back to where do we come in? I certainly believe, I think it was the man who said so, that we need to do a lot more talking. We need to exchange ideas, but not just ideas for the sake of them. We need to, thresh those ideas, see what the actual content is. We've talked about democracy here. What are we going out here to say? That's what democracy is. That's what we'll try to pass on to that people. Tobore, if I got the name right, one day she would teach me how to say that name so I don't make a mistake. Talked about, helping people to finance their, manage their finance. Very good idea. But the danger is that becomes a goal in itself. All right? When people begin to manage their money, they want to now become rich people. What are they doing to earn that money they're managing? So that it's not just managing. I don't know the details of what she done. I'm just going by the little that I heard here. So please, if I got you wrong, pardon me. But what I'm saying is that we need to review the content of everything we're doing. I've been a lecturer, and I have to keep asking myself, what am I passing on to those people? What values am I passing on to them? Will those values help them to get better if they accept them? Because you can pass a value and nobody accepts it, it's no use. But if they accept them, will that make a difference? We have to be very careful about poverty and to be sure which poverty we're talking about. The greatest harm Africa is suffering from, it's not poverty that there's not enough food. It is the poverty of the mind. I've seen many poor people in my village, dead poor, who will not steal your kobo. And I know many rich people in my village who will steal your kobo if you just give them the opportunity. So we need to know, and that brings us back to that consciousness. How do we begin to raise it? Emmanuel was saying he couldn't relate it to what he was doing. I remember, I don't have the details of the story, but it was in Liberia, before the coup that brought Samuel Doe to office. There was a group called Mojo, Movement for Justice. And I'm told those people would go with the rural poor. Government says plant rice. They will follow those people. People who were doing conscientization, who were doing consciousness raising business. They go with those people to the rice farm and say, yeah, they say we should plant rice. I beg, let us plant the rice. But you see, those people who are saying we should plant the rice, they're the same people who steal this rice as soon as we produce it. So when we plant, let us now plan how we are going to make sure that rice stays here and we eat it. Because they will steal it, go and sell it at a higher price, and then come and give us 2 pence. That was happening across the country as I understood it. That softened the ground for when Samuel Doe came. Unfortunately, he lost the direction all the same. Because until that time in Liberia, the group who had power were people who, they were like, if you like, a particular ethnic group. But those who were not, they were the returned slaves. Yeah, at the time when slavery was still part of, those who were shipped back from the United States, they came and they now saw themselves, we've been to America. And so we can lord it over everybody, the top mans of this world, right? But it needed somebody over a period of time to raise the consciousness of the African to say, look, those people, where they went is all right, but we can do that here. Unfortunately, a ruffian took advantage of that consciousness and seized power. The point I'm making, ladies and gentlemen, is, again, like I said, let's lower our sight. Let's get more thorough as we lower that sight. Let's be sure when, what value we are actually trying to communicate to people, so that those are the values that will bring us back to becoming a productive population. Everybody, including the poor people, those who are wanting change, they are wanting the change because they think it will just be like that. Money will flow everywhere. It will not happen like that. We all have to learn how to go back to work. Because if you don't work, that thing will not come. That's where the kind of work Tobore is doing comes in. teaching people to manage what they have. Not necessarily, and that's the fear I was expressing earlier on, telling them this is how you become rich. But how do you manage what you have so that you are self-sufficient, so that you don't fall below that poverty line that makes you outside? They will be asking you. That's why, Tony, those people you were calling together to didn't provide things to make it conducive for them to go. That's why they didn't stay. We need to work on those kinds of things. That idea, and I couldn't help it. The man who said something about poverty, unless you slept with poverty, you don't know what dignity. Unless you have seen wealth and rejected it, you don't know what dignity is. It's not poverty. The person who has slept with poverty wants to be rich. But the person who has seen wealth, and he says, sorry, this is for service. It's not for consumption. That's when you know a man with dignity. The poor person, most poor people want to get out of poverty about dignity, about honesty. Unless you're doing so with a bowl of rice. All right? And it's good to give them rice, but give them rice with some other value. Our politicians give them rice and hope that their mind will remain poor, so that next time they bring the rice, they will fight over it and forget other things. You distribute the rice to them and tell them, see that man who's giving us rice. He could have built a rice farm here, and we can produce the rice ourselves, and we don't have to depend on him. But the way he is going about it means that every year, or every election round, he comes with bags of rice, he comes with bales of wrapper, all of us fall over each other and get it. And in the meantime, the one pauperizing you. It's a very difficult job, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not trying to say, give a contrary impression, but I'm saying because it is very difficult, we need to really calm down, take the whole thing apart, pieces it, all right? Get the essence and then try to put it back together and build the kind of value that will begin to show people this is the kind of society we should be going for. I may have rambled a whole lot, but I'm just saying there's good substance I hear, but we need to take that good substance, see how we can improve on it, and come up with something that we can actually work with in our different places. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. We've really taken quite some time, and our time is almost gone. So I think we will need to round off. So let's just ask let's just provide our concluding thoughts. Let's start with EHU. What are your concluding thoughts? EHU, are you there?
Okay. Well, yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. It's been a wonderful discussion or interaction. I guess for me, I would just conclude by saying we need to re-educate our youth on the importance of hard work, not just any hard work pushing wheelbarrow, but hard, positive hard work that pays. Because when you talked about bringing up a training and people fall by the wayside, it's because currently, which is one of the issues that we're having, is everybody wants fast, instant aggrandizement. The money is sharp, sharp. And it's unfortunate that even in our individual churches, you hear pastors saying, as you just go out, I see somebody getting 5 million. Nobody is telling the youths that, hey, you have to work and hard work pays. And because of that, everybody wants things quickly. So if you're bringing up something and they're not seeing the results immediately, they don't want to waste their time. So I think for me, I'll conclude by saying we need to reawaken the youth consciously on the importance of honest hard work. if we do that, then I think we are bringing up a crop of youth that will not just be intelligent and honest, but people that will be idea and purpose driven. And that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Okay. Your concluding thoughts?
Is it Emmanuel?
So I said Tobore.
Okay.
Oh, I thought I had Emmanuel. Okay, sorry. So for me, my concluding thoughts would be I would like to encourage those of us who stand on the path of goodness, fairness, just equity, and all things good, to be as optimistic as our politicians who stand for things that are crooked and they don't care so much about justice, fairness. They don't care. But your average politician, your average crooked politician, is exceedingly optimistic. They believe they will win. They believe if they go out, they will get. I would like to encourage those of us who stand for what is true and just. If we really believe that what we believe in is good and is worth fighting for and is long lasting, let's learn to be optimistic, sound like we're optimistic, and preach that message with hope. And as we begin to become more vocal about it, we will create the ripples that will spread and we'll begin to create the change that we hope to see. Hopefully, prayerfully, optimistically, we will see that change we desire. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone. It's been lovely discussing with us tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobore. Emmanuel, your concluding thoughts?
Okay, so for me, it's just reiterating what I said with regard to sensitization, but it's not necessarily like going to teach people. It's just having that conversations. I think we as African youths or Africans as a whole need to question everything. Our political system, our religious system, our economic system, our, everything, health system, because when I zoom into most of those things, I see a lot of flaws and I think the conversation starts there. So my intention or my hope is that when people watch things like this, it's not going to end in the comment section. It's going to translate into your homes, the bus ride to school, church, hospital, wherever you are, you're going to bring this conversation now to that level. Like, what do you think about this thing that these people said? We have raised some challenges and proposed some solutions. So we have this conversation, because when I have this conversation with people, I realize that some people are not even thinking about it. They don't even worry about why is the lawyer wearing the white wig? Why are we going to school for 7 years? Why is this person like this? So till we question some of these things, are we going to understand the why and then maybe the how? So I think this conversation is very important because it's just to spark that thought, spark that questioning as to why do we have these issues and what can we do about it? So I really hope that people are going to be watching this, are going to take it to the next level of disseminating this conversation and the ideas into their communities. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Emmanuel. And now, Prof, your final thoughts?
All right, two things really, and let me start from where Emmanuel ended. He made a point saying people should ask questions, question everything. I think that's very important. And until you begin to question everything, you won't begin to get first your own personal answers and see how those personal answers dovetail into or diverge from what the social or political answers out there are. And that to me is an understanding of what that bracket of life we call youth is all about. When you're asking questions, demanding answers, let's do more of that, both about our personal lives, our countries, our religions, and so on. We have a tendency to take things as given. No, we should question things as we see them. Not question in a way to be destructive, question in order to be constructive, in order to find what would help us and help other people to be better at what we do. The second point is just, again, reminding us what we said earlier. What we're talking about here is a long-term process. All those young Nigerian people who were mobilized until the debacle of February 25th, I wish they would find fresh energy and, re-engage, not necessarily in a partisan way, but re-engage in the way we've said earlier on by asking questions. Why are things this way? What can we do to improve them? And if each of us, including myself, I undertake to say, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to do it in order to facilitate, to support that the raising of consciousness amongst the young people, even among the older people, because some of us in our generation, we're part of the problem. If we've not taught our children the value of work, we've simply taught them the value of consumption, because we made money, some of us, the wrong way. We have passed on the wrong message. We've destroyed that life. So all of us have a responsibility. It should be possible for people to have conversations in their families. All right? It should be possible for a child to say to the father, I don't understand why you do these things this way. Or for the child to scold a father to scold a child to say, no, that's not how we do it. In those days, we brought up in the family, my own family we have a family name. We don't mess with that name. We have honor, we have integrity, and we want to value it. Even when we don't have food and so, we have a name. I don't know if people tell, some people you wonder what they'll tell their children is the family value. But all I'm saying is, let's take this as a long-term assignment. It will outlive all of us. But while we live, we should be part of that process to see that things are better, beginning from our own little contribution in our own little corner. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Prof, for that. It's really been an interesting conversation this evening. I don't know whether I should say, unfortunately, we can't continue forever. We have to wrap it up here. This has been an OYALD Table session in celebration of World Voice Day 2023. And we've had Professor Ekekwe, a political scientist, Emmanuel Lara, the Secretary General of OYALD, Tobore Lumoye, a personal finance coach, and Adihechi Achom, a musician with us. They've really brought out some valuable insight on our topic, which is the reawakening socio-political consciousness of the Nigerian youth. And I hope maybe sometime in future we will all come together again for a similar discussion. I hope we'll all be available to do this again some other time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great time on OYALD Table, and we just have to round it off here. Thank you very much for being on this session and for contributing meaningfully. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Prof.
Keep all that money. I'm coming.
So they stop recording. I have to talk something first.
Emmanuel, you can stop recording. Let's now have the meeting after the meeting.